The title of my presentation is user experience, and this is for a reason, because whatever we do these days, uh, both in our classroom and when we do teacher training, is about you. So now my focus is also on you and your user experience. I want to begin this presentation by asking you to do one thing, okay? I don't know where you're sitting, whether this is in your kitchen or your study perhaps, or your bedroom or outside in the garden, I have no idea. But I want you to look around or visualize um, a drawer in your kitchen cupboard, a drawer maybe in your study room, a drawer that has things in it. So it could be a junk drawer, it could be a drawer where you keep important things. So can you maybe get up, have a look, or try to visualize a drawer in your cupboard? Possible? Have you got this drawer in your mind? Or maybe it's next to you somewhere. If it's next to you, you can open it and see what's inside this drawer. If you just visualizing the drawer, can you tell me if your drawer looks like this and it's full of very important things, as you can see, probably sometimes even life-saving, different objects. Is this your drawer? That's the way it looks. Or perhaps the drawer you had in mind looks like this. Which one is closer to the truth, please? Okay, is it one or is it two? In between, that's an interesting option. Kasia, you never stop surprising me. Um, Now, what I want you now to think about is how this drawer, whether you talk about this one or that one, how do these drawers reflect the way we teach and the way we prepare presentations? Are our presentations full of ideas, very perhaps creative and very important, as you can see, but not necessarily well organized? Or are our lessons or our presentations more more like this, so basically tidier and neater, and to what extent it actually matters when we talk about user experience. When you go to someone's session or observe someone's lessons, which kind of approach do you prefer? Do you prefer something like this, or you prefer something like that? I bet in some cases, your answers changed from saying, yeah, I don't mind my drawers looking like this, but when I teach or when I go and observe someone's lesson or I teach or train myself, I prefer the session, the lesson to be like this. That's, I think, very, very human. Okay. So as you probably have guessed by now, part of my webinar is going to be about one important word beginning with O. Can you tell me what word it is? Begins with O. Right letter. O. Owl. Owl. I talked about owls a long time ago. Order. Yes. Almost. Organization. Thank you, Dorota. You won a pralka. Yes. Organization is one of the key words for this presentation, so please remember this. Organization. Okay. Now, let's move on. I want you now to look at these words, or in some cases, expressions, and imagine that you walk into my teacher training session or you walk into my classroom, and as you walk in, you receive a piece of paper with one of these words only. Okay, so I'm showing you capture. All right. Now, can I ask you to choose one of these words now, the one that you like the most? Think about it. Okay. Now, I would like you to close your eyes and say this word to yourself. You can say it quietly. You can shout it out. I can't hear you, so you can shout it out or say it quietly. Okay. Now I want you to turn to your imaginary partner, as you would in the training session. So are you with me? And I want you to draw this word in the air very nicely, not too fast. And I want you to enjoy every single movement that you make as you draw your word in the air. Are you doing this? Okay. Now, I want you to take a piece of paper, imaginary, if you don't have one, and take an imaginary pen or pencil, and I want you to write down this word as nicely as you can. This is a calligraphy type of writing. So in the class, it will take you some time to write it nicely. Maybe you want to illustrate it with some drawing. Maybe you want your letters to be colorful. Okay? It's up to you. It has to be a piece of art, something that you care about, that you want to pay attention to. Okay? So imagine going through such a process at the beginning of the lesson, and or a session. Then imagine that you want to pair your students up, or maybe group them up. So perhaps you put them in groups of 3 or 4. And you get your students to look at each other's words, expressions, and you ask them what these words have in common. So what is the common denominator for these expressions? Obviously, it takes time to figure out. Some students will divide these words into parts of speech. Some other students will perhaps think about the meaning. Any ideas, guys, what these words actually refer to? What do they have in common, please? Any suggestions? Now, students in the class can see 4 words at a time. Now, you have the whole list in front of you. These words have something in common, and the something in common is one word. Attention, yes, Ola, fantastic. All of these words actually collocate with the word attention, Now, this is how I often introduce vocabulary to my students. Sometimes I change this a little, obviously. And why do I do it at the beginning of the class? Well, I do it at the beginning of the class because this is when the students' minds are often the most alert and the most attentive. This is the first 10-15 minutes of the class is the time when students can remember the most. This is what the research says. I understand if the lesson beforehand was, for example, PE, okay, that might be slightly different, or some boring physics or chemistry or something. In which case, perhaps your students need the first 2 minutes to do something else. But still, the next 12 minutes is the time when we introduce the most important ideas, okay? And the same refers to our training sessions, where at the beginning, instead of introducing yourselves for half an hour, or I don't know, introducing perhaps theory for another 20 minutes, you would want people to remember the most important thing. Okay, so in this case, it is organization, okay, and it is attention that will play an important part in this session. Now, sometimes, to make something more catchy, because that's what the brain likes, we ask the students to write on other pieces of paper, maybe, or somewhere on the walls or other objects. And this is what I did with my students. This was 2 weeks ago, actually, before the PACE conference. I don't know if you manage to do this sometimes when you teach. This is bad photocopying skills, basically. I was trying to make some photocopies, and of course, as you can see, I didn't cut off the black part of the piece of paper, and as a result, well, I ended up with lots of pieces of paper like that, okay? And I thought, shall I chuck them out, or shall I perhaps use them for something? And I used them for that activity, the one I have just done with you, and I asked the students actually to write on these black pieces of paper with chalk. Can you see that? Chalk, capture, yeah? So the students were using these black pieces of paper with the words I gave them, and they were trying to write them as nicely as possible, again, on this black piece of paper. Well, the same technique obviously can be applied to a teacher training session where instead of collocations, for example, you want to introduce some important terminology, okay? And you want the participants to remember certain key words, all right? Okay, now I want you now to move on with me, remembering the keywords. So far, it is organization and attention, okay? Now, I want you to look at these questions, and again, as you walk into my session, you would receive a piece of paper that looks like, you know, a strip of paper that you kind of on a daily basis, okay? And you will have noticed that I have allocated the names. So your names are next to one of these questions. Can you please find your question? I hope I haven't forgotten anyone. If I have, please choose any question. I hope I've got everybody covered. But if I don't, I would like you to choose any of these questions, okay? So imagine you walk into my teacher training session or my class, and you receive a piece of paper like this. What do you think I want you to do with this piece of paper, actually with this question? What do I want you to do? Well, I don't want you to answer this question because I understand you may not have enough knowledge in your head to be able to confidently discuss this question. I may want you to, of course, compare the questions between you and other partners or other participants in the session. Sure, some students or participants will have some answers, truly. But what I want you to do is I want you to, precisely, Kinga, I want you to listen to me throughout the lesson or my teacher training session to get the answers, okay? And as soon as you get the answer, I want you to either shout or indicate. I will tell you what to do as we go along, okay? Now, does anyone know the answer to that question? Yes or no? Maybe you do. Well, I would not be surprised if you did. I hope I do, okay? I have some assumptions. Good. Assumptions is what we want our students to have and we want our trainees to have, because if somebody has the assumption, that's a very fertile ground upon which you can build as a trainer or as a teacher, okay? Now, if I want the brain to wake up a little bit, I can, for example, this is just an example. You can bring, for example, I keep saying, a paper plate or paper plates to your classroom and ask the students to write the question sort of around the plate, yes, using perhaps nice letters again. And as they go through the lesson or the teacher training session, they will try to write the answer in the middle of that plate. Now, this idea came to me after I realized that I party a lot. I have lots of parties at home, and at one point I had so many paper plates in my cupboard that I didn't know what to do with these paper plates. So I thought, perhaps I can take them to the classroom. And this is how I use them. This was about a year ago. Unfortunately, I don't have any paper plates that were made by my students to show you, but it was great fun. Now, why did I do it? I did it because I wanted the students to treat my questions as something important. I didn't want these questions to be in their notebooks. I wanted the questions to be somewhere separate from the usual stuff, okay? Now, of course, at the end of the lesson, it would be ideal for you to collect all of these plates and simply keep them, yes, for future reference, but that's impossible. So I often ask my students to take photographs of any unusual note-taking exercises that we do in class so that they have them for future reference. So then we often go back to these questions. Now, you may want to know what kinds of questions I would use with my students. Well, these could be questions about grammar. So, for example, when I taught conditional sentences, as they walked in, the questions were, oh, how many different conditional sentences we have, For example, the first conditional refers to which future or past, for example, or but for, how do we use this construction, etc. Yeah? And as I explained grammar throughout the class, the students were collecting their answers and writing them, for example, on a paper plate. Yeah? Now, I will go back to this in a moment. Okay, do you feel warmed up now? So the keywords, I repeat, are organization and attention. And maybe, as you can see from these two activities, perhaps novelty. Okay, so we've got attention, organization, and novelty. Now, when you plan your lessons or you plan your training sessions, who are you? Are you more of a planner who decides on what stages your session should have? Are you more of an organizer and thinking of how to organize each particular section? Or maybe you're more artistic and more of a designer and you actually want to design the experience, not just the knowledge, but the experience for the people who listen to you. And perhaps you're also an engager, somebody who does their best to make sure that the listener is engaged. Well, to be honest, all of these four are extremely important, and I think the best teachers and the best trainers are those who have those four features in them. This can be trained. It's not something that you're born with. It comes to you with, I should say, age, experience, okay, where you can control all of these four functions or roles you have. Now, are you familiar with this gentleman? Well, I was never a fan of Star Trek. Anyone here? Anyone feels love with the series or the man? No, good. I never understood it, but I understand why people may find it fun. Anyway, what I want you to realize, I'm sure you recognize the character though, don't you? Captain Placard. You may not remember the name, but the face and everything, that's quite crucial. Now, when you think about successful teaching or teacher training, it's obviously all about engagement. And if you remember him, he just used to lift up his finger like that, and he would say, engage. And everybody engaged. No matter who. They all engaged in action and did what they were told to do. Is it the same when you teach or teacher train? Then you say, hello, everybody. My name is Marta Rosińska. I want you to engage. Boom. And you engage. It simply doesn't happen. Yes, we wish it did, but it doesn't happen. So we have to find ways in which this engagement actually happens. Yeah. Now, I don't know if you're interested in something called something called positive psychology. But there were two gentlemen, Christopher Patterson and Martin Seligman, who came up with some interesting thoughts on what actually happens during any kind of educational, let's say, activities. And in their book called Flourish, this is the book here, they said that, or actually Seligman said that to be happy you need pleasure, you need engagement, and a sense of purpose. Yes, that's kind of perhaps obvious. But to learn, you need, is it enough to have pleasure? Is it enough to have engagement? And is it enough to have just a sense of purpose? And if so, how do we go about this when we teach or train? Okay. Well, my idea and my sincere belief is that we also need the following. We need engagement, and this is the umbrella term, okay? And we need attention and we need organization. And this is what I want to talk to you about today and prove, hopefully, how important both of these are, attention and organization, when it comes to engagement in teaching and teacher training. And this is me, as you can see, sort of looking a little bit like Captain Placard from Star Trek, trying to tell the teachers, engage and believe in what I have to say. I think I sounded a little crazy there, but well, there you go. Okay, are you with me? Hard work. Yes, hard work is very important, Alicia. Absolutely hard work. But this is not the focus of my presentation as such, although as you will go along, you will see that all my activities actually demand a lot of hard work and thinking on the part of the student. But for this particular session, I decided to focus on these two as my main priority. Okay. Now, I want you to imagine your teaching or your teacher training as a piece of furniture, like this one, a chest of drawers. Okay. And there's always the top drawer, which is the most important one that you need to organize really well and think about. This is called engagement. Okay, this is engagement. This is the top drawer, the umbrella term. And then we have this organization and attention. And I want to, as I said, talk about these two in particular. So let's start with attention. For the last maybe, I don't know, the last year or so perhaps, I've been working very hard on, or actually reading up upon engagement as such, and I'm very much interested in what engagement is, and engagement that does not equate to fun. Okay, fun is very important, and I couldn't stress it enough how important it is to have fun in the classroom. But fun is only part of what true engagement is, and the same refers to both the teaching that we do and teacher training. Okay, so how to engage our students, our participants, our trainees through attention. Okay, and attention is when you actually concentrate on what is being said and you are trying to process it. Okay, and you're trying to process it. I'll show you examples in a moment. Now, attention is a tricky business because our brains are difficult organs. Now, what actually catches your attention? Can you answer one of my questions? If you look outside of your window just now, how many trees can you see? Or how many other blocks or flats can you see? Or how many cars can you see? How many of anything can you see? Many, lots of, yes, exactly, but you don't know how many. Now, if I asked you to count, for example, how many cars or how many people you can see through your window or anything, you will probably be able to do it and tell me, I can see 10 trees, I can see 3 cars, I can see 11 people, okay? But you would be able to do it because I told you to do it and I directed your attention at that, which means that you were, in a sense, nudged or pushed to remember something. Otherwise, you would not have a clue how many people there are, how many trees there are, even in your own garden, unless somebody directed your attention to it. Now, what do we do as teachers or teacher trainers not to allow anyone to sort of fall asleep? Although daydreaming are obviously distraction part of learning, and we can't stop this because the brain needs to be distracted in order to go back to what it was doing before. But of course, we need to minimize the time in which our students switch off completely, or our trainees switch off completely. Okay, are you still with me? Have you not fallen asleep? Now, if you have 2 pieces of paper in front of you, I would like you now to write on one piece of paper direct, and on the other piece of paper distract. Okay, direct, distract. If you don't have a piece of paper, I want you to just remember about these 2. And as I carry on my session, I would like you to decide what actually is helping you to focus your attention and what is actually distracting your attention. And I want you to be very critical at what I do, because I'm going to mess up some things, okay? Well, I mess up presentations quite often anyway, but I'm going to mess up something on purpose this time, okay? So at the end of the session, I want you to tell me what helped you focus and what actually distracted your attention, and perhaps you just drifted somewhere, I don't know, outside looking at the trees in the garden, okay? So let's start with attention. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with this book. It's called The Organized Mind. If you haven't had a chance to read it, it's worth the effort, because it explains beautifully, absolutely beautifully, how our minds work in the 21st century. And it mentions what attentional systems and attentional mechanisms are.